I was just wondering, like, what do you fill the void with? Because like a lot of people, they go from like gaming a lot, and like same with me, right? Like, I used to play a lot of video games, and I still do actually. And like so, like, what do you do to like transition into like playing less video games, doing more with your life, that kind of stuff? Because it's easy to just like say that like you shouldn't play video games, but you also have to like replace it with something else. It is like a part of like
I
addictions
mean,
in a way.
yeah, I wouldn't say go stop playing video games and start smoking like 50 packs every day or something like that. Definitely not. But we have to remember that, first of all, we have ridiculous, like absolutely obscene amounts of recreational time nowadays, at least if you're working a more average job. We have like obscene amounts of time where we can just sit down, even during work. I don't know what study it was, but I remember hearing from one priest that it's like maybe 60% of people's time at most jobs is spent looking at their phone and like looking at random stuff. It's we have so much free time nowadays, and we kind of have this expectation that, "Oh, we need to watch YouTube, we need to, like, play games, we need to text our friends," but really, that time should be used for something that is genuinely nurturing, whether it's physical or mental work or prayer as well. I mean, remember, the faith, at least the Catholic religion, technically does call not really laity as much, but priests up until Vatican II, they had to pray 7 times a day, and they're not short prayers, it's like good 25 to 30-minute prayers 7
Hmm.
times a day, and us as the laity, we can do that too. There's, like, minified versions of most of those liturgical prayers known as the well, some people call them hours, some people call them the more proper name would be a divine office, because it's what you do throughout the day, and that's really people's days were you back then were composed of you woke up in the morning, you prayed, you went to work, normally a more
Hmm.
physical work, you prayed again, you did more work, you went to bed, probably had like a nap in the middle of the day, woke up again, prayed the evening prayer, worked a little bit more, prayed again, had dinner, went to bed. So like it was a much more you were living this life that was symbiotic with God and nature. And that's like the ultimate goal of people. I think anybody trying to get out of the system, quote unquote,
Hmm.
that's what you should be aiming for. It's not hard. You don't just get it all on day one. I definitely don't have it now,
Hmm.
but I think having that in mind, once you have that like clear mental image of that, it's easy to know what are the next steps to take. You kind of immediately know like, oh, can't do that anymore because that would not fit in a life like that. So I'd say if you were quitting games, replace that time with something I mean, I'd say spiritually nurturing, prayer, just even stuff that you can do with your friends in person, going out to do something. It's very nice. I live in the South, and I live in somewhere that's not too urban,
Hmm.
but not too rural either, kind of like a small, semi-industrialized town,
Do you
and
have
I'm
like a lot of
still able to
hobbies?
have I guess so. I have friends who live nearby me, and we're often able to go out and do things and go to places, and it's really nice. In terms of hobbies, I mean, I still do a lot of the stuff that I do on for my videos, and I am still editing videos and working through that. That does take
Hmm.
up a lot of my time, but most of it honestly is just studying and working on like on-campus organizations, little things like that.
Yeah.
Purely recreational things. I guess I exercise and do a. I used to do a lot of swimming. I haven't done it recently because it's been really cold, but back in the summer I used to go swimming a lot, and I actually used to swim in high school. But I actually, yeah, I used to do like races and stuff when I was younger, but not anymore. So I kind of been trying to get back into that. I think a good physical activity is what a lot of people could use, especially something like that can be turned into something competitive, even on a
Hmm.
low level. But yeah, I mean, if I were giving advice to somebody who's like, man, I should quit video games, I'd say the way that I viewed it when I was like 15 or whatever, I was like, this isn't really fun anymore. And yeah, I mean, I started doing other things, many of which that were, ways of wasting time as well. But having that mental image in mind of like my ultimate end goal is like theosis. My ultimate end goal is like getting to a level where I have more virtue in my life, where I can wake up in the morning and I don't think about these worries and I don't think about these things and I can literally be in peace and pray. That's something which, if you don't have that frame of mind kinda building, then you're gonna be lost. You're gonna just, like, what's the word? You're gonna relapse straight into,
Mhm.
gaming for, like, 5 hours a day. And I know this well because one of my relatives, I won't say who, but one of my relatives is really into this kinda gaming all the time, and he would spend hours upon hours upon hours playing video games. I think it was, like, Hearts of Iron 4 and, like, War Thunder, which are the
Mhm.
biggest time sink, like, awful games possible, and it was just abysmal. It was eating his life away, and then he began to realize, like, yeah, like, this isn't even really making me happy, you know? And it took a while, but eventually he started doing other things. He started going out and exercising and talking to people and talking to girls and things like that, and life picked up a lot more, you know, because everything is out there, like, the whole life if you look on the internet and try to go and talk about anything, everybody's like, "Oh, no, things have gotten so bad, everyone's so terrible, everybody's mean." It's like, you're seeing an extremely small fragment of society that's been purposefully picked out to
Mhm.
be agitprop, you know what I mean? It's all agitation propaganda, like what the Soviets used to do. You turn on the internet, and what do you see? You turn on the news even, and what do you see? Oh, this awful stuff is happening. This terrible thing is occurring, so on and so forth. It's made to make you this vegetative, like absolutely mentally like incapable being with no determination and no ambition.
And so
But if
this
you
applies to
quickly
like anything, right? So like if it's not just gaming, this is like
oh
like
yeah,
any
yeah,
type
there's
of
other
addiction
things
that you
too.
may have, right?
I still struggle with a lot of that stuff because I will still occasionally find myself going like, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna check like a YouTube channel that I haven't checked in a while." And I'll go and
Mhm.
before you know it, I've spent like
Just binge
45
watching.
minutes watching a video about it.
Yeah. um, you were like I was looking at one of your videos, and you were talking about how
Uh,
we're taking AI and we're trying to create God with it. And I was wondering about
yeah,
that.
I guess.
Like what are your opinions on AI and like where we're going forward with that, I guess? Cuz that's like the I guess what everybody's like interested in right now. Even though
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
a hot
really
it'll give you a really good excuse to put those tags in your video description and, like, your
exactly.
video metadata, which will get you a lot of engagement, you know, because that's what everybody's looking up searching up on the internet,
I mean, I
is
don't
video
even
description.
understand. Like, I actually don't even understand AI, and I use AI a lot for like
Yes, yeah.
getting
Well, I
work
mean,
done
the
sometimes.
easy
But
way to understand it is it's sorry. If you wanna get technical, I'm not super advanced in the subject, but if you
mhm,
wanna get technical, it's really just imagine a nth dimensional vector space, and you just put in a vector, and you find whatever vector in that nth dimensional space is closest to it,
mhm,
and then based off that, you look at all the different dimensions. That's when they talk about like the size of their models or like the precision. It just means how many knobs can you turn on this. So, like for example, most text-based AI like ChatGPT or whatever, it'll look at a letter or like two letters or a bunch of letters going up in your sentence of what your question is, and then after having studied like the entirety of human writing up until a certain point of everything they could get their hands on, they're like, "Oh, the massive model we've built tells us that after passing in all these letters and turning the knobs just about the right way, we've ended up with these coordinates on this nth dimensional space. And
mhm,
what's the closest vector we know of in the next like nth dimensional space it's right near it. Oh, it's this random one. And apparently, you just keep doing this more and more and more and train it with more and more data, and it just starts speaking like a human. I don't know. It seems like sorcery, but that is how it works. Like mathematically, it's so big that once you get to that level, the results are pretty much unpredictable. But the idea is it reaches a critical mass of data and is just able to answer anything you want, which is crazy. Anyways, unnecessary nerd nitpicking, like super like deep delve that nobody wanted aside, let's get into the social ramifications, the stuff that people actually care about. At the end of the day, my biggest fear with it is that it used to be that media was slowed down by humans' ability. by humanity's ability to create media. So if I
Mhm.
wanted to put a video out there promoting horrible things, I actually had to go sit down and film myself talking about horrible things. If I wanted to make a video out there, like literally the entirety of like the explicit video industry, all of those explicit videos, they're limited by the fact that somebody actually had to go and produce those,
Yeah.
and money had to be exchanged and whatnot to produce those. And now we've enslaved multiple generations of men and an increasing number of women to this. Now imagine that, but we can produce it literally in the blink of an eye with a computer that's powerful enough to literally make any image you desire. So I think I wasn't trying to go directly at that in the video. I don't mention pornography in the video, but it is sort of also what I'm getting at. That and pretty much everything else. Like imagine combining that with VR where you could now be like, "Oh, you know what? I don't want to." The way that people treat media nowadays, it's like Marvel movies. I don't want to think. I want to turn off my brain for 3 hours.
It's because
I'm
we
just
want to
gonna watch the.
satiate ourselves, right? And like we're kind of
Yeah,
just
I mean,
consuming, and
it's
we
even
want
I
that
wouldn't even
material.
call it satiate because satiate implies that you actually feel better by the end of it. But
Mm,
with something like watching a Marvel movie, I did it once. I remember because it was one of my friends' birthday when I was a kid, and we all went to the cinema to watch this big Marvel movie. And I was like, I had never seen any of them before, and I was like, that was like the worst thing ever. I feel so weird after watching that.
yeah, I guess
But
it's like an
anyway,
endless hunger, right? So you're
well,
always
I mean,
craving
it's
for more.
slop. It's
Yeah.
slop, right? It's just like a
Yeah.
good guy beating up a bunch of bad guys, and guess what? The good guy wins. Oh wow! And it's like a bunch of corny reused jokes. But anyways, you have that, right? Imagine that, but like we can produce it. We don't have to wait for a producer. We don't have to wait for actors. We don't have to wait for anything. Obviously, the AI isn't at that level yet, but we'll get there. There was one artist, I forget exactly. I think I might have quoted it in the video, but I remember hearing about this when people were first beginning to complain about the AI. This is a couple of years ago, and
Hmm.
somebody said, "We're pretty close. We're pretty close to the level where we could realistically send an AI through all of your family photos and make like a movie about your life, for example, or like make a movie based off like dead relatives of yours coming back to life, or like just like take information of your life and turn it into something that can be generated overnight by your phone, and then in the morning they're like, "Oh, look at this. We made a TV show about you and your friends." And it's
Mm,
like it's such an insane thing, but it's really where the technology is leading us to. None of this matters though because the specifics of it don't matter. At the end of the day, all that is it's going to make people more and more glued to their screens. Social media, media in general, pornography as well, it's limited. Like there's a cap on it because, like I said, people actually do have to put in effort to make it. But because we have such low standards for media, especially nowadays, once the AI gets good enough to pass as human and even not pass as human, people will start consuming that content and be like, "Oh, that's pretty cool." And at some point, we'll get to the point where the AI prompts itself and is able
mhm,
to produce content based off itself to the point where it can tune itself to your preferences and create videos that are personally especially made for you, which means that that dopamine fall off of, oh, I can't find anything I like to watch on YouTube, I'm going to stop watching YouTube. That's going to be less and less of an occurrence because at some point YouTube's going to just start making videos for the sake of getting more engagement from you. So that was the idea I was trying to get across in that video. When I say that we're trying to recreate God, I think in the capacity of creator, right? Because
mhm,
we're like with a lot of stuff, obviously, right? But in a way, like nuclear weapons and all that is just trying to yield a small part of God's wrath. But with AI, it's we're yielding the creative abilities of God. God has created the world and humans being made in the image of God, man being made in the image of God, is also a creative creature who's able to go and create things out of God's creation, right? And now
mhm,
we're introducing this AI, which at least to our eyes, to our human understanding, is able to create, right? Is able to create things. I guess we could view it much in the same way that animals create dams, like beavers create dams, or like ants create ant hills. Although we view it as it having creativity, whatever.
mhm.
But that's when I talk about it being God, I mean it in that sense. I mean it in the sense that there'll come a day where you'll be able to put a VR headset on and go into a completely artificially created world that an AI creates to your exact specifications. And we'll get stuff like that because people are just infinitely bored and in need of satiation, but not real satiation, like I said. But yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that
kind of what I meant to get across in that video.
that endless hunger. And I was just wondering, like, with all this consumerism that's going on, right? How does it make
Uh huh.
sense? Like, how are we going to continue as a society if all we're doing is self-deprecating and making us waste time and not really being as productive as we could be and not being efficient? How is it going to translate to a better world in the future if we're continually
So no, I get what you mean. I would like to not phrase it in the way of productivity and efficiency because those are like
Mhm.
industrial terms that are like really not what humans are made for. Like we're not made to be, at least in the way that we understand it nowadays. Like oh,
Yeah,
you produce this much for your boss. That's not real human productivity. Real human productivity is being able to feed your family,
yeah.
being able to like provide for your children, your wife, and your cousins and whatnot. That's productivity. That's what God put us on the earth to do, to subdue it and to provide for ourselves. Suffer while doing it, yes, but to provide for ourselves. In fact, it's because we're not actually doing this and instead being far productive, like being working jobs that aren't real,
It's like
doing
pseudo.
things that really
Yeah,
aren't, yeah,
yeah.
like inconsequential things that we are so punished, we were so suffering. So when it comes to that, at the end of the day, it's not even that complicated. Simply put, the people who are not the people who are not interested in living out a more traditional lifestyle, so to speak, a more human lifestyle, really, are just not having children. It's just the fact of the matter that, likely speaking, those who are genuinely interested in straying away from these negative and nihilistic, many times, anti-natalist attitudes are themselves going to be having children, while the people who have those attitudes naturally will not be having children, which means that in 50, 100 years, they'll be like physically gone. Like they literally will not be alive, which means that the only people left will be those people who are interested in those things. So I think it's already happening right now because if you look at the statistics, the latest generations are beginning to get
That
kind
is
of like
actually
reversed.
something that's interesting, is that like populations, like the way that populations actually work, like the exponential decrease of a population can happen over just a few generations, right? And so like you can go from, I don't know, like 27 million to 3% of that in just a couple generations. Like, for example, Korea, like where they're going, where they're headed, at least with their replacement rate, it's not great, right? So that's like a pretty dystopian
Yeah, I mean,
reality.
I'm not really concerned about the numbers. I don't really
Mhm.
care about the numbers because it doesn't matter. Like if you put your faith in God and stuff, like it's irrelevant whether all these people are alive or not. It doesn't really affect you. These obsessive fantasies and like the illusions of this globalist like people like Bill Gates who are like, oh man, there's too many humans on Earth. Like nobody really cares. At the end of the day, right? All that's gonna happen is, yeah, we could look at individual countries and be like, "Oh, that population is decreasing, that population's increasing." But all that matters is really you, your family, your community, all that stuff. Everything else outside of that, the world can do whatever it wants to do. It's really irrelevant. So, I think that focusing too much on these trends, especially when they don't relate to you, aren't super important. At the end of the day, the pattern which I wish more people would recognize is that, simply put, the way things are going, especially in most Western countries, you're simply not gonna have people with these neoliberal attitudes of, "Oh, it's okay to, like, live this weird, like, debauchery lifestyle, this, you know, it's okay to go and waste your life and waste your youth. It's okay to go and, like, do all these bad things." That attitude is slowly dying out, and we're seeing it in the statistics where the younger generations are more and more inclined. I thought there was like a poll recently that was like the younger generations are more and more inclined towards having a positive opinion of marriage, which is one of those institutions which has been slowly declining in the West for the past 200 years or so. And
Mhm.
now we're actually beginning for the first time to see a sort of level off in people's attitudes in terms of religiosity, in terms of Christianity. There was one poll that I just saw that was the level of like people who declare themselves as Christian nominally, whatever that means, right? At least the statistics show that it has leveled off, that it's not decreasing anymore as it used to be. It's actually leveled
Mhm.
off, which is kind of crazy. But that's because the new generation, the only people who thought it worthwhile to have kids in the past generation, to some extent, were those who actually cared about the values of having kids. I can't speak for every couple, obviously, right? But especially those where the parents are still together, most of those couples, if they had more neoliberal attitudes, would have divorced. So when you see a couple that's like of a Gen X sort of age and they're still together from their whole life during marriage, chances are they probably had some serious religious and moral foundation behind that. My parents are like that. You know, my mother always had a very expressed desire to have children. And she even would say stuff like, if she couldn't have five children, she would have adopted five children, you know, like a strong motherly instinct
Mhm.
because the boomers before them had such an anti-traditional attitude with stuff like the sexual revolution and whatnot, a pro-pleasure attitude really. Because of that, you ended up having this decline in people of the Gen X generation who actually wanted to have kids. So the few ones that actually did, and the few ones of those that actually had a lot of kids, are the ones who held on to those values, who carried the torch. And so their kids, which tend to be the millennials, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha kids that we're seeing now, all those people are going to have a bit of a better formation than like the boomers and the some older millennials and whatnot. Like you just see it right in front of you everywhere. At least everywhere I go, especially here in the South, you see it where the younger people are the ones who are more on fire about the faith. They're more on fire about the importance of the traditional values. They're more on fire about even some of the political causes and whatnot. It's simply put because there's fewer of them, but the few ones that are there are the ones which basically made it through the fire, who made it through all the debauchery of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s because their parents and their grandparents cared enough to actually make it so that they would be born. And so you people, what I would say to everybody who cares about this stuff, like, don't worry. At the end of the day, we know the conclusion, Christ wins, but we also know that merely like scientifically speaking, that sounds so Reddit tier, like scientifically speaking, but you know what I mean. We just look at it like at face value. Who is having kids? Not the liberals. They're not having kids. If they're having kids, it's out of pity. It's not like they're just going to have abortions. They're going to commit these horrifying sins. The liberals are not having kids. It's going to be the people who actually care to some degree about the kids who are having kids, especially in the upper classes. So I would say don't worry about it because at the end of the day, we can sit down and like doom ourselves all the time. But really, the only responsibility, first of all, we have is to our own soul. And then that responsibility extends to everyone else, like your wife and your children. But that's who it extends to. It doesn't go to everybody else. So don't have this obsessive apocalyptic worry because that's exactly what the globalist attitude wants to put in you. They want to put in you this over concern for people that really are irrelevant to you. As nice and warm feeling as it make some people feel, it really does not matter, you know. So yeah, it's tragic that countries like South Korea, Japan, and even my own country, Italy, is basically dying off. But at the end of the day, right, I know what the conclusion is. It's all going to lead to a society which is probably going to have a lot stronger values by the end because the people who are dying off are the people who didn't care enough to have the kids, to sacrifice, to suffer, which is really what we're all called to is to suffer. So, yeah, that's why I don't really worry about it.
I I disagree with you on some parts. Um, One of the parts is I like isolationism, and so like I don't think that that is necessarily the correct way to go about. Like obviously, I do understand what you mean. Is like in your own like circle, in your own bubble, what matters most is your circle, right? At the end of the day, what you do in your like tiny group of people, your community, it's going to have very little impact on the greater society at large, and so you shouldn't have to worry about what's going on around you on a global scale, right? But I do think that we do need a certain level of globalization and like globalism, I guess. I don't know exactly the term. I don't know if globalism is even like the correct term. It's simply like a trade thing for me. Is like
Yeah,
you
it's
we
globalization.
yeah, globalization. And so like we always want to like have freer trade, and like I like at this point in society, it's no longer as beneficial to have wars and to like take from other people. Instead, it's better to just trade, right? And so, like having an isolationist mindset and thinking that um, you're going to be bringing in wealth by having less free trade and by doing those types of things. I think it's kind of counterproductive in a way, but it's one of those things that will like pan out in like the next like couple hundred years. Obviously, like that's just like something that I look at like historically, and I just realize like okay, this isn't exactly the way to progress. Also, when you talk about liberals and liberalism, I think that there's like a weird thing about the word liberal now is that it doesn't mean what it used to mean, which is simply just like free, right? And so like when I think of the word liberal, like actually think of the word liberal, I think of just like free. I don't think of like political like anything to do with like politics or anything like that. I think of literally just being freer. And so like in a way, I guess it doesn't really make sense totally because conservatism doesn't necessarily mean that you're less free, but it just means that you have a more conservative mindset, right? So you value traditionalism more if you're conservative. But I don't know, like what is your thought process when you say the word liberal? Do you think like simply like political and like how our generations are becoming more and more free in this way, and then they're becoming more, I guess, I don't want to say evil, but it is kind of in the way that you describe it is debauchery and things like that that are happening simply because of more free mindset, I guess. Uh, yeah,
So
Neil.
I'll address the globalization part first.
Mm-hmm,
If you go to like a rural village in Bangladesh, they're not very affected by the trade agreements between Bangladesh and India. If you go to the Amish, I don't think the Amish could care less about the trade wars between the US and Canada. So when somebody lives, so I mentioned earlier this idea of working towards a life where you can pray 7 times a day, and that I think also should include some level of I'm going to go like real Luke Smith mode here, but like some level of independence
mm,
to the point where you are able to support yourself independent of quote the system. I mentioned it at the beginning, this idea of exiting the system.
yeah,
That a big part of that is economic and not relying on an economic system to provide you with food and shelter and whatnot. There's an extent to which you can nearly never detach from it in your lifetime, at least nowadays in the 21st century. But I think none of this should concern you if you want to it goes back to what I was saying about, like, don't listen to the news, don't listen to the media because it's agitprop, but it's also gonna make you start thinking about topics which are really not relevant. Yeah, I would understand if somebody working in government or somebody who works in a big business that deals with international trade would want to keep tabs on trade agreements and globalization and whatnot. But if you're the kind of person trying to escape the industrial system, trying to escape all of these things, which we agree are bad, then it does make sense to want to limit this. The idea of worrying about America and even these other countries as a nation and worrying about them having certain trade agreements and certain whatever is really like we shouldn't even we've gotten to such like a past level where like we've gone so far with it that that's even ridiculous we're discussing it in the first place. Like all it will have, like I don't know, better trade with China. Oh, now I can more easily get little plastic trinkets and tools from China, which are cheaper. Like maybe they're $10 cheaper at Home Depot or wherever I'm gonna buy them. that's you shouldn't be buying stuff from Home Depot in the first place. You shouldn't be using industrial tools in the first place. You're meant to be, like, on a farm working with, like, animals and stuff, like, that's what humans are made for. So in the end, like, the, like, end goal of anybody who's trying to be more independent in those things, none of this stuff should really matter. You can use them as stepping stones on the way to freedom, but, like, even having a discussion about that, it's like, it's really irrelevant because worrying about the trade agreements between one country and another is really not gonna profit you anything. Anyways, to the liberal question, I think that your definition of liberal is still pretty bad though, because having somebody be free to do anything is how you end up with a satanic society in the first place. That's what Satan was. It's what that's Luciferian. He goes out and says, "I will not serve." I will not serve God. It's not a I will give myself the option whether to or whether not to serve God every day. No, it's I will not serve God. Right. So you have this very clear attitude from Lucifer that's saying I completely refuse to have an authority over me. That's liberalism. Even the classical liberalism, even the liberalism of World War One, even the liberalism of the French Revolution, all of these are evil. They're all evil because they oppose the order of God, which is fundamentally ordered, where there are rules and there are, laws put in place for justice. Liberal societies still have these, but instead of orienting them towards Christ and giving the social kingship of Christ, they instead orient them towards man, towards the benefit of man. That's why liberal societies allow stuff like pornography. They, liberally distribute stuff like explicit material and allow people to go and do things which were completely unthinkable in the societies that preceded them. And that attitude of the French Revolution, that attitude of, oh, we must like the Enlightenment in general, which is like, oh, we must understand and like codify and like perfectly rationalize everything. It's an atheistic and a satanic attitude. So it's what leads to disorder. It ultimately leads to it. Maybe on the way there, there's moments that seem really good. Like, I don't know, a lot of people, they like to idealize the 1950s and the 1930s and 1940s and like whatever, all these olden times because they're like, oh, wow, look at how much better people used to dress and act and be, and they were kinder and they were more trusting. We lived in higher trust communities, all this kind of stuff, right? But all of that has led to today. So we can't look at that and be like, "Oh, that's all good," because in those moments, in all of those pictures of the 1950s, they were constructing the ladder which would bring us to where we are today, which is much like considerably worse. So having this idea of like, oh, guys, no, the old liberalism was good. It's only the new liberalism that was bad. It doesn't make sense because trying to say that being free is neutral inherently isn't a fact. Like you cannot be neutral and believe in this idea of absolute freedom because if people are given absolute freedom, what's going to happen? They're going to descend. They're going to descend into chaos once you give them that freedom. It's just the natural consequence of it. And it's what
Mhm.
we've seen since the French Revolution. So, yeah, I mean it's an attractive thing to say, right? Like, oh no, it was better when I don't know, Woodrow Wilson was doing his liberalism, which was about self-determination and all of these cool values. But all of that self-determination led to where we are today, where there's widespread debauchery, there's abortion, there's contraception, there's, like euthanasia of people in Canada. They permit euthanasia, they encourage euthanasia. It's ridiculous. All of this stuff, it's all what that liberalism, this idea of I will not serve. It's not just about like I'll give people the choice to serve. It's like I will not. If you don't serve, you fall into that. It doesn't matter how good the intentions are. All of this like liberal attitude, it naturally leads to that. As mild as it is, your children will be more liberal than you, and their children will be more liberal than them, and so on and so forth until we end up with a society that's like the way that it is now. So it's a slippery slope, and having that attitude in the first place, it's impossible. There's a really good picture that I like that depicts this. It's like classical reasoning, modern reasoning, and postmodern reasoning. And then classical reasoning, it's a picture of a dot. and it says the dot is there, it stays there because God put it there. And then it says modern reasoning, and it's a picture of an arrow going up, and it says this is what progress looks like. It's gonna keep going up forever and ever and ever. And then it goes to postmodern thinking, and it just shows a complete, like, jumbled mess of lines, and it says, it's like a bunch of gibberish, basically. And it's like, that's what we've fallen into, because the first one is what we're meant to be. The second one is a prelude to the third one. So yeah, it's easy to say, like, I used to be like that a lot too. I used to be like, "Oh, you know what? We should just go back to how liberalism used to be." But then I realized that doesn't matter, because any ideology that, like, allows itself to be changed like that is dangerous. The only, quote, "ideology" that matters is an ideology that is eternal, and the only eternal ideology is that of Christ, the social kingship of Jesus Christ, crowning Christ as king of society. That's what matters.
So I wanted to ask one last question on this topic. Is just if liberalism and like so like my definition of liberalism is just simply like freedom, I guess. And so like I guess I can understand how freedom can devolve into chaos because that is like the nature of humans to tend towards chaos. And and I guess
Yeah,
like
sort of.
it in
Yeah.
like the way that entropy and like things and like the universe just works, we tend to
I guess
devolve
it's
in some
original
ways.
sin. It leaves a stain on on humanity,
And
and the
so like
original sin, even after baptism, right?
yeah,
It still leaves those, like, bad. It leaves those bad inclinations, yeah, towards sin.
the question is just simply like why do we have free will if it is to be absolute in our I guess free and if it's to be absolute in our servitude, if that makes sense. So like
So it is the paying of the ransom for the iniquities of man and the sins of man, the incarnation, the crucifixion, right? The crucifixion specifically. And so Christ crucified dies, and that death, that it is consummated, it goes and it heals the rip between man and God. So man falls away from God in original sin. Eve and Adam eat of the fruit and stain the entirety of humanity, all of their children, with original sin. And then that original sin is taken away at baptism because of Christ's crucifixion and his reversal of Adam. Adam sinned via a tree, Christ is crucified on the wood of a tree. It's the reversal, right? And so God gave us that free will, not really for sin, but he gave us that part of this, all being part of God's plan, is to permit the crucifixion, the incarnation, and especially permit the crucifixion to be as glorious as it is, to be as much of a beautiful thing as it is. That's a very, very shorthand response to that. I mean, to understand that, it would take a lot of, yeah, I mean, it would take a lot of virtue and, like, study to really understand something as deep as that. But
and
at
so
the end
like
of the day, if you, yeah, go ahead.
my next question would simply be like if we all have an amount of sin because of original sin, right? And so like I guess baptism would help
Yeah,
reduce
baptism
that.
washes away
What?
original sin. Original sin is completely gone after baptism, but the stain of original sin remains after, and that's what gives you the inclinations. Really, the concupiscible appetite is one of the main things which is left over. Like this desire for pleasure, this desire. It doesn't leave you because it is something which is remained from original sin. The sin itself is gone. The
Mhm.
offense against God is gone. You're not guilty of it, but like, if you baptize somebody, which can only be done once in their lifetime, if you baptize somebody and they die immediately after the baptism, they go directly to heaven because they're clean of all sins after that baptism. But the original sin itself, even after you're baptized, obviously people still sin after they're baptized because it retains a your soul retains a stain from that.
Mhm. And so do you believe that any amount of conservatism and any amount of traditionalism can make you. I think it can make you less of a sinner, but I don't think that it can make you not a sinner. And so like this is just like a point that I'm trying to get across is just like no matter how traditional you get, you're not gonna it's not gonna stop you from not sinning at all, right? You can
Oh,
you can beat
yeah.
yourself over the head over like about it, but at the end of the day, you do have to like repent.
So
Uh,
it's a little bit more complicated than that, especially if you're talking about like Catholicism and like what Christian sin. And I mentioned earlier, I kind of said it in passing, like you want to achieve theosis, and theosis just means godification. Like,
mm,
so you have the Council of Nicaea, right? It's the council which states in explicit words that Christ is God. And at the Council of Nicaea, I forget which saint was it that said it, but one of the writings of the Council of Nicaea, they say God became man so that man could through grace become God. So everyone is called to that. What does the word religion mean, right? Religion. It's a doing again, religion of tying again yourself to God. You're returning to God. That's what the word religion is. It's your ascent back to God. So obviously nobody purports that just because you live a healthier lifestyle or live whatever any of these superficial things may be, even going to church every single day, receiving the sacraments every single day, they're not going to keep you away from sin. If anything, you need those things more and more. You need confession, especially more and more, um, the more you sin. Every church, it's a church. What's the unifying thing of every church? Every church is full of what? Of sinners. So it's not like nobody, very, very few people, very few saints even have the claim to fame of being like, oh, they never did a huge sin. Like maybe St. Thomas Aquinas, St. Therese of Lisieux, like a couple of saints that we know of in history that reasonably speaking did not commit any grave mortal sin. They say
mhm,
that St. Thomas Aquinas, when he died, he passed by purgatory, he knelt, he genuflected, like short knelt, and then stood back up and went to heaven. Like that was how
mm,
pure he was. But like there is a way, like you're meant to achieve theosis. You're a wounded creature, right? Original sin, it leaves a wound in you. And what can you do with a wound? You can either let it fester and grow and get worse, or you can actually do something to help it heal. Will it ever completely, fully, 100% heal? No, because there are the three grave dangers, right? There's the world, there's the devil, and then so you have these things that are constantly attacking you. There's the devil, especially after the world has gone out, and then there's the flesh, which is your own body, your own flesh, which goes against your soul sometimes, right? So
mm,
a lot of the times people will be like, "Oh, I have demons," right? But most of the time, it's actually just their own flesh or the
yeah.
world and the people around them who are influencing them to sin. But that's just a side note. Anyways, there were saints like, for example, Saint Anthony the Great, I think it was, who lived in the deserts of Egypt, and he got to such a level of holiness, the devil had to physically hurt him. He had to physically fight him in where he had locked himself into his fort to pray. The devil physically fought with him, like physical blows, just to get him to sin. And he would fight back. He wouldn't go and succumb to that. So you can, you're meant to. None of your circumstances will help you, of course, to stay away from sin, but the essential way to stay away from sin is to pray, hope, not worry.
Mhm,
Go and receive the sacraments. Obviously, I'm talking about this in a Catholic context. You're
yeah.
meant to receive the sacraments. You're meant to go to confession. You're meant to go and reverently attend mass and receive the Eucharist in a state of grace and pray and grow in sanctification, grow in all the virtues. And if you're able to consistently do this, which is no small feat, you will, you'll start by getting rid of all mortal sin, right? And everybody
Mhm,
thinks that's like the end of the spiritual life, but it really isn't, because everybody who's gone through that, everybody who's like, I've gotten rid of all my bad addictions, I've gotten rid of all my bad, like general, like big vices, like I'm not going and getting drunk anymore, I'm not watching porn anymore, I'm not doing all of these, like the big stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like the big stuff, I've gotten that out of the way. And then they begin to realize I'm still a bad person, or I still have I'm still I'm still not that good. I'm still doing things which, yeah, they're not mortally sinful. They're not things which send me to hell, right?
mhm,
But they are things which are still venial sins. I'm being rude to others. I hate others, things like that, which we all, it's so hard to get rid of. Anybody who's tried to genuinely go and iron out their soul like that, it's so hard to do. It can be done, but it's a lot of virtue. That's why purgatory exists. It's to purge you, purgatory, right? To
Mhm.
purge you of all of those bad things which are left over in your soul, not mortal things, not things that kill your soul and send you to hell, but little things which stop you from going to heaven, like cleaning you, purging you before going to heaven, right?
Mhm.
So you have all that. So I would say you
It-
say living traditionally. I'm assuming you mean like adhering to church teaching, going to church regularly, all this stuff. Because like
mhm.
traditionally can mean all sorts of things to different people. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you mean like in the Catholic sense, right?
Yeah. I like
But
I guess the way that I'm like thinking about it is like it is like a tough topic. I feel like I do agree with you that it is possible, right? And I do think that is something that requires an intense amount of faith in God. And so for me personally, like one thing that I just want to like put out there is just like if not everyone can do this. And like I know that like it may feel like everyone should be able or like we want everyone to be able to do this. But in a world where and I'm just thinking strictly like I guess logically, I'm not thinking about the faith necessarily. I'm just thinking about it as like as the world is dynamically if everyone were to be faithful completely and to be meditating always, you wouldn't get anything done, right? Like I guess
so that's
that's where you have to have faith in God in order to provide for you. And so like it's like one of
well,
those I don't know like yeah
yeah, I get what you mean. It's well, I didn't say that everybody had to live like a monastic
yeah
lifestyle and like
yeah
isolate themselves from the we're meant to be, so the phrase is like we're meant to be in the world, but not
mm,
of the world. You're still meant to be in the world. Even the most isolated of monks will still go and visit a priest or somebody occasionally, also to receive food, also to receive the sacraments, all that
yeah
kind of stuff. Like
because they're
even the
dependent as well,
hermits,
right?
yeah, no, absolutely. We're meant to go and like we're meant to have other people. We're meant to do all this, and we're
Mm-hmm.
meant to be out there working. You're meant to be working and praying, right? That was the motto of Saint Benedict:
Mm-hmm.
"Ora et labora," work and pray. So, work can be all sorts of different things, obviously, but yeah, when we're talking about your day, if anything, it's a much like it's a much harder calling. It's actually a much like in some ways, there's a lot of virtue to the monastic life. There's a lot of virtue. I say that because I mentioned Saint Anthony, right? Who was a monastic, basically the founder of monastic life, right? But there's a lot of virtue to being in the world, living a life that is average, quote unquote, but sanctifying that life. Having a home where you walk into the home and you have the pictures and the icons, and you have somewhere to pray, and you do pray before bed. My father, for example, my father is a pilot. My father literally there are his schedule is so erratic that he doesn't get to go to church many times when he should be able to. But whenever he has the chance, he does go to church, and he does go to confession and faithfully observe everything. The church does allow for, dispensations if you're somebody who can't regularly make it. That is one of the excuses listed under reasons why you are excused from going, say, to every feast day and every Sunday to church. That's
Mm-hmm.
like a very practical point. But anyways, so that doesn't mandate a lifestyle which is copy paste. God demands different things from all sorts of different people. However, all of these lives, all the lives of the saints, what do they have in common? They have the sacraments, they have detachment, and they have the theological virtues, right? So you mentioned having faith in God. It's good you mentioned that because that's one of the three theological virtues, right? You have faith, hope, and charity. So you need faith, you need hope, and you need charity. Anybody who doesn't have all three, they're not being Catholic. They're not Catholic because you need all three. And these are virtues which we must pray to God to give us. There are acts of faith, acts of hope, and acts of charity which you pray every morning to give you those virtues. That virtue of faith in God, hope for God's plan in the future, and charity towards your brothers. So You need all those things, and those all take different forms in all our lives. And then you have detachment, which I mentioned, which is basically making it so you're able to walk in front of a beautiful, like, juicy steak and be like, "You know what? I don't need that." That's a very, like, general example, maybe doesn't apply to everyone, but you know what I mean, right? Like,
Hmm.
having the ability to say no, even when something is very like, basically to take it or leave it, that is an incredibly powerful virtue, and it's something which pretty much every saint had and developed. Saint Augustine, for example, who was extremely lustful in his youth, he was born by his mother was a Christian and wanted him to be Christian, but he fell into sort of weird Gnostic, paganistic, um, astrologist sects, and he would like constantly be chasing after women. He had his famous catchphrase, which was, "Oh, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet, not now. I can be chaste later, not now." And he developed such great virtue and a great love for God out of that because he was able to detach away from that. So I think maybe you did not like maybe I didn't explain myself in the best way as I could have earlier, but we really are all called to that. We won't all get to it. We know we won't all, and that's just between you and God. But we are all called to that holiness.
Hmm.
It'll look different for every single person. Every saint looks different, but it is only one path. There's many walks on that path, but it really is only one path. So, um, like for example, somebody who's extremely well studied and understanding in the faith can still end up going to hell, while the medieval peasant the serf who lived in the middle of nowhere but genuinely had real faith and received the sacraments with true, contrition for his sins and true, like, veneration for them, his love of God is much greater. We're measured by our love of God, and that takes the form of these really, really beautiful virtues that I mentioned: faith, hope, charity, and that detachment from the world. So I'd say, yeah, we are all called to it. It looks different for everyone, but we are all called to it. And we shouldn't treat it like an excuse and be like, oh, well, I can't be like a monk. Yeah, but you don't have to be like a monk. You can be in lots of other ways, but you're not excused from those virtues. And
Hmm.
we all kind of deep down, we know that. Like, we know that we shouldn't be so easily swayed by smelling fast food and wanting to go eat fast food. I
Yeah.
give you one example, right? Or we know we shouldn't be so easily glued to our screen or so, because that's the
These
world's
these
trying
are
to
all
manipulate us.
forms of temptation, right? And
Yeah,
so,
yeah, absolutely. We know we shouldn't be like enslaving ourselves to these things. We all know. And so that call to detachment and that call to faith, hope, and charity, it's there for everyone. We all need it. So yeah, I'd say it takes different forms, but we really are all called to that for sure.
nice. Well, that was a good talk about faith.
Yeah,
I
no,
think,
I really appreciate that.
yeah. I wanted to talk more about, like, I like talking about religion and faith, and I have a background in Hinduism and Buddhism and things like that, and as well as Catholicism. And so like there are a lot of parallels between the philosophies of Hinduism and Buddhism that tie back to the understanding of Catholicism and Christianity in general, right? Um, and so like uh, it's always good to see the parallels between different societies and how they relate to your own, right? Um, I couldn't give you like I could give you some examples of that, but I don't want to get into it too much. But yeah, it is kind of interesting. The way that like you talk about detachment, it's very similar to some Buddhist philosophies.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
in that they developed a lot of detachment is a
yeah.
natural virtue. So it's something which you can pray to God for it, but it's not a theological virtue. Like
Hmm.
the Muslims living in the desert or the Russians living in the middle of the cold in Siberia have developed great natural virtue, but it's not something which, so, Christ very clearly says, few people will walk the path and that nobody goes to heaven except through me and through baptism, through the waters of baptism. So,
Hmm.
I would sort of back off from those things a little bit because of the views of their views of God, for example, of what God even is, are completely opposed to the Catholic understanding. And even some of their monastic life is very, very opposed. Like, for example, for the longest time, the Buddhists had no conception of a woman being a monastic,
Mm.
or they had no conception of, oh, there's a lot of odd stuff in there. Like, there's unholy vegetables in Buddhism that they're not allowed to eat, probably because some monk really didn't like them.
Yeah, I mean,
But
like
yeah, no, there's a lot of
when I
sort of
talk about
virtues
that,
there.
I'm simply talking about like the philosophical side. I'm not necessarily talking about
Yeah,
the
but I
more
mean, it's
religious
hard sort of to
traditions.
detach those things, right? Because yeah, we can kind of sit down and analyze them from the worldly perspective, right? Of like, oh, these people have these many virtues, these people have that many virtues, or these people did like built this big of a
Well,
temple, and these other people built that big of a temple.
it's not
But at the end of the
necessarily that
day,
I'm looking at their virtues. It's more that I'm looking at their texts, and I'm able to see that there is influences between um like Sanskrit texts that go back into like Buddhism, and actually like I don't know exactly how much of a spread it may have had, but like there is influences of Eastern philosophy in Christianity as well as like vice versa. At least like in more recent times, it is like it is interesting to see the other perspectives. That's just like what I'm trying to get at.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, you won't really, it probably won't do much profit to your soul, but it certainly it reminds us that God does create all man with. So God ensouls us, right? God breathes a soul into every man. You know,
mhm,
it breathes a soul into your mother may give you your body, but that body receives a soul from God. It's God who breathes that soul into you. And that soul, by virtue of it being made in the image of God, receives with it certain qualities and things which make man very unique. Like, for example, every society, even the most remote, uncontacted of tribesmen living in the middle of nowhere, have some conception of sacrificing to some god, as
mhm,
disordered as that may look like, as they may be sacrificing children, women, whatever, to this god, but at least they understand that basic concept of there is a god that we have to sacrifice to. They understand basic justice, like that there's some badness to like killing, there's some badness
mhm.
to stealing. They won't fully understand it because they don't have the fullness of truth which is contained within the church, but they do have some sort of like bits and pieces of it which are left over from inside of their soul. They also have all the bad stuff, which is
Yeah.
from original sin. So you do, that's just a thing which is common with all humans. I mentioned the Muslims. The Muslims have incredible natural virtue. They have lots of very detached people. They have lots of very disciplined and devout and zealous souls in there. But when you have that fullness of the fullness of truth in the church, that's when really the beautiful things can happen. There's a reason why European civilization was the best and was the pinnacle of all time. There's a reason why when Christianity arrived in China, nearly all of the country under the emperor converted, only for that to be reversed and weird stuff happened historically. But the it was actually the historians that I implore you, if you do have the time, one of the most beautiful things you can read, it's unfortunately from the heretical sect of the Nestorians, but it does inside of it include a lot of truth. There's this really beautiful limestone inscription in China called the Nestorian slate, and the Nestorian slate is essentially a description of the practice of Christianity from how the Chinese saw it and how they imported it. And it includes the command of the emperor. The emperor commanded them to build churches. He commanded them to get more priests and all of
Mhm.
this stuff from the church in Syria that it was visiting them. And the church in Syria visited them, and they began writing and they were like, these guys, they pray 7 times a day, they fast, they have their mass, they sacrifice once a week, just like the Catholic Church does. And he describes it in such a beautiful way. So there's a reason why, the pinnacle, right, is when it's under Christianity, when society collaborates with God, with Christ, you get the pinnacle of civilization, the pinnacle of art. What's the
Mhm.
most like renowned and most thought-provoking art, right? It's everything that deals with man, original sin, and Christ, because that that touches deeply into our soul, right? That really like digs deep into our existence, everything to do with God and Christ. So I would say yeah, there's some virtue to a lot of those people, like the monastics living in the middle of Nepal or whatever. Plenty
Hmm.
of very well detached people who have incredible discipline, incredible zeal in their souls. But if you really want to see the fullness of that beauty, the truth, the full, unadulterated truth, right? It's the church. It's the beauty of the church, right? It's in the saints of the church, the lives of the saints, the miracles of the church, right? That's that is really that's when you see that, nothing else will be the same.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Um, do you want to talk about something else? So, like, one thing I just realized is we didn't actually even introduce you. We just went straight into
Yeah,
talking, but yeah,
we just kinda went straight into, like, talking about
yeah,
DaVinci Resolve,
yeah, exactly.
which
So, if you
was
wanna,
really the only Olympics topic we did.
if you want to introduce yourself and who you are, and then I can
Yeah, I guess
place
you
it
could
all
cut
together.
this part
Exactly.
and put it at the beginning
Exactly.
or something like that, yeah, so it's clear.
Mhm. So, who are you, Denji?
Well, my name is Alex, but yeah,
Yeah,
I
Alex.
go by Denchi online. I have a YouTube channel, a website, and a bunch of other stuff I have online. And I make videos, I write articles, all this sorts of stuff. And yeah, no, it's I'm very happy to be on here doing another interview. I think this is the second time I do an interview after I did that one with what was it Brody Robertson did one when I was like
Mhm.
15 or like 16 or something, which is so cringe.
Yeah.
It wasn't that bad of an interview. But like yeah, it's I guess that is who I am. Yeah.
Yeah, and so, like, I was looking into your channel, and like, one thing that stands out to me is that you draw a lot. Actually, you're like into art, and you actually draw sometimes.
Not as much as recently, but yeah.
Mm. Do you so like you don't draw as much anymore?
I don't remember the last time I drew. I did do a couple of like videos with some drawing
Mm.
and stuff. I used to draw a lot more when I was younger, but it's never been a huge thing that I do now. I
Okay.
mostly make the Linux videos.
You want to talk about your music at all, and like what you're doing
Uh,
currently?
Not really. No, I don't really have that much to talk about with that.
All good, all good. Um, I guess we could talk about Linux Fest and
Oh yeah.
going to Linux Fest. Mm.
So I'll try to come this year probably. I'll put out an announcement once I decide that I'm able to. It'll depend on a couple of things, but yeah, I mean, if I'm able to, I'd love to. It's a really nice opportunity. Last time I went, it was really terrible because they did not record my session. I had to record
Hmm.
it myself and I uploaded it on my channel, but the camera was recording, but I'm assuming they pointed it in the wrong way because it looked like it was pointing straight at the ceiling and not at me. The same thing happened to Luke Smith's talk, which really sucked because his talk seemed interesting. It was about like Bash scripting and like 101 Bash tips and tricks that you can use, which is like the nerdiest title ever.
Yeah,
But it seemed pretty cool. Like that, I would have probably wanted to go there and hear that. But yeah, sadly, it was not recorded. So yeah, what can you do?
and so where is Linux Fest
Oh yeah,
located?
sorry, I should probably. It's the Linux Fest, Southeast Linux Fest, which is in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, okay. So I saw some videos about you talking about Tor and like other. You're kind of you care about security, I guess, in some ways, like encryption and things like that. And so like my channel is kind of about cybersecurity, and like that's like one of my main
Uh-huh.
interests is just cybersecurity, and getting people interested in cybersecurity, because I think it is a field that is gonna matter a lot more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about like
That's what I
for
was trying
work or whatever, I
to.
don't really know much about that. But when it
Yeah.
comes to your own personal like digital hygiene and being sure you keep your footprint online pretty clean,
Yeah.
then yeah, those are all things which I think matter. Like especially if you're going online and like going and like I don't know, doing anything financial or anything like that, you want to be
Hmm.
sure that you're not gonna get like your information stolen or whatever. But I made the videos on tour and everything to try to just like as educational videos. I really hope people don't watch those and like start like buying drugs and stuff because that's not good for you.
Yeah.
But I even say it at the beginning of the video. I'm like, "This video is for educational purposes only. Please don't buy drugs." Something like
Yeah.
that. But I think the most valuable skill is just being able to understand what, like, how computers and networks work, so you understand when you can be tracked and how easy it is for you to be tracked. Like,
Mhm.
Tor is pretty crazy because it does, like, pretty much using the Tor browser, you're unless you do something really stupid, you're pretty much covered on all bases for most of the ways people can track you on the web, at least, because
Mhm.
the IP address is taken care of, even if you're on the clear net. The Everything to do with, like, fingerprinting online, they take care of for the most part. There's a lot of anti-fingerprinting measures. It doesn't come with JavaScript turned off, but typically you do turn it off anyways. And I think this is kind of like a side note. I think it is pretty fascinating to see how people work under those constraints. Like the way that they've been able to develop apps and like websites that work entirely without the use of JavaScript because they
Mhm.
know that everybody's going on them with it turned off.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. That's interesting because it really forces you to go and
You
work
gotta
with like some good
think outside the
constraints and
box
stuff.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you gotta be creative, which is pretty cool. It also means that it's easier to work with those websites on like older devices or
Mhm.
devices that are a little bit slower, with no JavaScript support, stuff like that, which is always a good one. But yeah, I don't really make a lot of videos like that anymore, but yeah, it's a fascinating topic for sure.
What are your thoughts on like cybersecurity in general and like getting people interested in it? Um,
Not really anything. I don't have a lot of. Like I said, I'm not really interested in working in it or doing anything. So it's like
mm. It's just
my
personal,
thoughts on
like
cyber.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like I guess if we're talking, if you mean cybersecurity, if you're talking about like what the word for it would be, like,
Personal cybersecurity, I guess. I don't know.
there's an actual word for it. It's oh man, it's on the tip of my tongue. It's it's something with like OPSEC. Yeah.
Operational
You're
security,
talking
yeah.
about yeah, if you're talking about your own personal OPSEC, I think that's a valuable skill for anybody using the internet. Even little kids, like even as little kids, we were always told, don't put your real name online, don't tell people your address or your phone number, don't
Mhm.
go to social media, don't like they would tell us pretty obvious like tips and pointers, which even grown adults don't do. Like either that or they get out of the habit of it after they're kids. They think they're immune above it, but really kind of we're all enslaved
Mhm.
by a lot of that tracking and a lot of these bad things. So basic digital hygiene, like I said, basic digital like security, OPSEC. That's just a life skill. If you're using the internet, you should know these skills because you can get screwed over pretty easily, maybe by some kind of hacker, some kind of not even a hacker, like a scammer of sorts.
Mhm.
It's easy. It's real easy. So yeah, OPSEC matters. But when it comes to cybersecurity, like as an industry or whatever, I really don't know the first thing about it, and I'm not super interested. So it's like my relationship to cybersecurity is like my relationship to like machine farming with beetroots. Like it's not something that I'm particularly knowledgeable on or fond of. It exists, sure, but I don't really know a lot about it.
Yeah, that's all good. I was just wondering, like, I guess we could talk about um DNS and like your new DNS video, or we could talk about the open frameworks and how they're getting locked down, or open front ends, open source front ends. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So on the DNS thing, I just made a little video on how to make a blocker so you could go and put that DNS server into your phone or your web or your Google Chrome or whatever or your
Mhm.
computer and it will block anything that you tell it to. You could either manually compile websites or there are pre-existing lists that are constantly being updated online that you can put into it and it will block all sorts of stuff like ads, trackers, and inappropriate content, social media, all these kinds of things. So it's really good as like a child filter or even just like a family filter for your whole network and stuff.
Yeah.
There's also mainstream ones. Like I know Cloudflare has a family filter, but I'd recommend running your own because the ones which are maintained on GitHub, for example, are a lot more thorough. Especially like for ads and blockers, there's no public ones. So if you want a thorough ad blocking DNS, that's a good one. Yeah.
Mhm. And so Yeah, I mean, we could talk about front ends and how they're
Oh
getting
yeah, that
API
too.
locked as well. Yeah.
So I mentioned this in a recent article that I made. I want to probably make a video out of that article. We'll see how that goes. But
Mhm.
essentially, it used to be the case, right, that you'd turn like for a second, and then you'd look back on the internet, and there were like 10 new open source front ends for like Twitter or whatever. Like, there's like three open source front ends for Reddit. There's like 15 for Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all this kind of stuff. There's like a huge trend in the 2020s and even like late 2010s and whatnot that people were making open source front ends like Knitter and
Mhm.
stuff for looking at mainstream social media. And now that all those social media sites are locking down, locking their APIs behind paywalls, locking their APIs and access to tweets and stuff, um, behind money, or for example with Reddit, they're locking down the API or whatever. It's made those open source front ends harder and harder to make. I think it's actually a pretty good thing, honestly, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is making a tool which makes it like a little bit less annoying to be enslaved. Because
Mhm.
all the social media is, it's just enslaving you. And so making an open source front end for that doesn't fix it. It's the same thing as my opinion with the Fediverse. Like nobody goes and starts using the Fediverse without already having at least some familiarity with Twitter, if not having been a Twitter user for a while. Like, name me one person who's like, my first experience with social media was the Fediverse. Like, pretty much nobody. It's all
Mhm.
a continuation or a cope with the pre-existing social media addiction, right? Or not even necessarily addiction, but just like the habit of it, I guess, right? So same thing with the front ends. Nobody starts using Knitter or something like, what's the other one? Like the Reddit ones without already having been exposed to Reddit or Knitter. And
Yeah.
that's not a or Twitter. And that's not a good thing. Like, it should be, we should stay away from those things. If they help you use it less, I guess it's good, but it's the same as like nicotine pouches. The nicotine pouch isn't really going to get rid of your smoking addiction. Plenty of people who use the pouches go back on smoking again. So like it just gets you addicted to a new thing.
Mhm.
So I know in some of my videos, like I made a video on RSS a couple of years back, and I was like, yeah, I mean, if you want an RSS feed off of Twitter, you can get it off of Knitter, which is already bad that you need to do that. But the fact that that's something which the fact that that's something which people want to like actively consume, I think that's the problem. We should just
Mhm.
stop using these social medias. And that's why I made that video called Why I Don't Have a Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, anything like that. Because I just think that it's same thing with the Fediverse. I just think that it's just a massive like waste of time. And I know people like this personally. Like, I knew somebody who I would sit down and try to talk to him, and half the time he'd be looking at his phone and going like on Twitter. And I met many people that I've met who are like that. And you can tell when you speak to somebody, you can tell they use social media. You can kind of like begin to get this picture in your mind because they all have the same opinions. They all have the same thoughts. They've kind of been homogenized, and it's really, really bad. You try to talk about something which is actually outside of that sphere, and their brains like shut down. It's crazy. So once you start noticing it, it's crazy. But yeah,
I think
in
one
that
thing to
article
like
about the
add on
front end.
this though, like is just like when I disconnected from social media completely, I was also kind of like out of the loop sometimes because I wasn't necessarily in touch with all the news that was going around. Going like, but that actually allowed for more conversation because people actually had to tell me what's going on in the world and like they wanted to talk to me about like news and like things that are happening. So it was kind of interesting. Like I don't know, like
Uh,
it is one of those things that you
I mean, I
lose
guess that's
from.
one benefit of not listening to the news. I
Yeah.
mean, I've actually never heard that one before. That's a pretty good one. But yeah, I mean, I generally advocate staying like completely away from the news. The
Mhm.
news is like for most of my life, the news was just something that we would put on in the background to listen to while we were
Yeah.
doing other things, which is like so bad, right? It's like such a bad habit. Um, and the problem with that is you go and you start worrying about things which really are irrelevant to you. Like,
Yeah.
the way that I put it is this way. Whatever's happening on the news, it actually occurring, like that event you're seeing depicted on the news has less of an impact on your life as watching the news about the event has on your life. You're more impacted by the consumption of the news of that event than the actual event in question. So,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, it would be best to completely like there's a lot of people like same thing with social media. I made that article on my website that's called Reddit Revelation. I was like 13 years old and I was like using my dad's phone or something to go on the Reddit app, which
Mhm.
had been inexplicably downloaded on there. And I just start going on it. And every day I would go to the Kerbal Space Program Reddit sub, which is where because I was really into Kerbal Space Program when I was like 13.
Yeah.
And I even made Kerbal Space Program videos. I have an old channel that has a bunch of Kerbal Space Program videos that I used to make. But anyways, I would go on that like
Deep
every day, like
deep Alex lore right there.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's not even that deep of a lore. Like it was not that long ago. But anyways, it was only like what 6 years ago. Nah, that's a long time ago. But anyways, so, yeah, I would go to Reddit every day, and then I started looking at posts and stuff like that, and I was like, "Man, I just really don't like this." Like, there's just a lot of stuff on here which agitates you. There's a lot of stupid like, even back then well, this was after the elections too, so, like, everything was, like, all weird and, like that was, like, when Reddit became really soy tier, you know?
Yeah.
But regardless, I think this would have happened with any other social media. I went on it, and I was like, "Man, this is, like, really bad." And so what did I do? I uninstalled the app because my logic was, well, you know what? I was having a good day until I purposefully opened this app and now I'm having a bad day. You know what would have fixed this? If I just didn't have the app in the first place. Like
Mhm.
the stuff which I'm reading itself has no impact on me. It's the fact that I'm reading it that's making me feel one way or another. That's
Yeah.
how propaganda, that's how agitprop works. And so I don't know. Maybe I'm just somebody who's particularly sensitive to that kind of stuff. I'm sure people build up a tolerance, which is kind of sad, right? But at the end of the day, you would have never like I think of people having arguments on Twitter, which is just like a such a ridiculous, like foreign concept to me that people have arguments on Twitter. And it's like, you know what would have you would have never gotten into this argument if you just didn't have Twitter, right? Or you would have never gotten and I understand that doesn't apply to everything because we like I said, we have to be in the world, not
Yeah.
of the world. We do have
I
to engage with the world. But
I find
you
arguments
do
like
not
really
need Twitter.
weird because like
You do not
normally,
need Twitter.
yeah, you don't need Twitter. Like I feel like arguments are weird because I like the like ratio of actual arguments in real life is like it's like basically like non-existent. It's like 1%. Like you might have like a bad day or something and then like you road rage or something. Arguments, like actual arguments like happening in real life, that like never happens to me. Normally it's just like discourse or like you're just talking to somebody or you're trying to explain a topic or like it's not like I don't know, like I don't come across like a lot of times where like I'm like super argumentative because I don't
Oh, yeah,
agree
I
with
get
someone like because it's like there's not that many people who like that you're gonna come across that is like you completely disagree with. You're gonna have some commonality. You're gonna be able to connect and at some level, right? Because you're human beings, and so like the only way to have like like an intense amount of arguments all the time, and which is like to me a waste of time, is because you take out the human element and you lose that like face to face like value, and so that you get more angry and you do like more. I guess like you say more stupid things. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty easy to go on the internet and just say completely outrageous stuff. It's pretty easy
Yeah,
to go on the internet and say that like you can go and just say anything because there's no consequence.
yeah, but you wouldn't say that
There's
in real
no
life, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
it's like it's kind of insane like when you think
Mhm.
about it, right? And so yeah, that's part of it, and then part of it is I think the website's design in and of itself encourages, like, inflammatory content, like,
Yeah.
it encourages replies, it encourages that over something like likes, but yeah,
Hmm.
it's sad, but it is what it is, and it gets you because negativity incites more of a response than positivity. It's why agitprop is so powerful is because
Hmm.
see something bad, you see something that threatens you, and that's number one concern in your brain, as opposed to something that's good, which is like, oh, that's nice, but like your brain is more geared towards being worried about predators than it is about being happy that you're alive and healthy and stuff.
Hmm.
So really at the end of the day, when you see stuff that it's very deeply studied to purposefully agitate you. And I think that it's a form of slavery. It's a form of slavery to be into this Twitter stuff and always be on this Twitter. So yeah, it's not good.
I guess it is one thing to say that you shouldn't use it. It's another thing to like give people resources and like things in order to make them stop. I guess like in a way it is like similar to any other type of like addiction, I guess, but it's like I'm not sure exactly how the neurochemistry works or whatever, but
It
it is
doesn't
like
really
one of
matter.
yeah, like you just need to like yeah, I don't know.
It doesn't really matter. You can it's so hilarious to me. Like we sit down and we spend like 20 years studying the exact like neurochemistry to understand that, oh wow,
This
guys,
is bad for
actually
you.
this is bad. Like, oh yeah, oh wow,
Yeah,
duh, oh
exactly.
surely. Like, yeah, or like, oh yeah, guys, you know what? You should just stop doing it. Wow. Like the only way to well, Twitter, I think, is like you can just can't you just like delete your account and stuff?
Yeah, you
The fact
can.
if any that's what I think it's a great thing. It's a great thing they're locking down the API and stuff because it makes it a lot harder for people to be like, "Oh, I'm just gonna take a little sneak peek," which is how all addictions are. Like if you're smoking and then you quit smoking and then you pass by like an ashtray and you smell the ashes, it'll like kind of be like, "Oh, I want to smoke again." You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So with Twitter, it's probably similar. People look at it, it's like, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna make an account again," and it's like, that's bad. But now that they're locking down the API, it's harder and harder. Same thing with like Reddit and everything else. So
In a way,
yeah,
it's
if
kind of
anything, them making the access more
good.
restrictive is actually really good.
Yeah. I guess we could transition into talking about communication. Like we're using Discord right now, and like how
Yeah,
people
isn't
are
that
able to.
sad?
Yeah. Yeah, because
Yeah,
like this is
I try
not
to
an
use
end to end
XMPP as much as I
encrypted.
can.
What was that?
I try to use XMPP as much as I can, but I
Yeah.
think that the trade-off is that the Discord is like pretty much all my friends that I know use it. Like
Yeah.
you go to especially in my school and just like my region in general, everybody's got like a Discord, either
Yeah.
that or an SMS, but pretty much everybody uses the Discord because in America, you're either using there's no such thing as like WhatsApp in America. You don't use WhatsApp. You
Yeah.
only use Discord, which is you only use like Telegram, Discord, Facebook Messenger, and like SMS. WhatsApp isn't even like in the top 10 or whatever. I don't know if that's actually how it is, but in practice, that's how it is. So,
Mm.
unlike literally every other country on earth, everybody insists on using Discord, which I mean, I don't really care for using Discord or WhatsApp or either. Like, either is really the same. WhatsApp makes these false claims of encryption when, like, yeah, it might be encrypted, but where's my private key? Oh, yeah, Facebook owns my private key. So like, there's no point to have actually encrypt it's like, yeah, we promised we encrypted it, but like we can look at it whenever you want, which is kind of crazy, you know? So yeah, if you want actual security, you're meant to be using XMPP or something which is actually like private, you know? So
And
the
could you
problem with
explain that
XMPP is that they
framework?
lack oh, what XMPP is?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I made a video about it a while ago. So essentially, XMPP is a open source messaging protocol, a lot like IRC. You get
Hmm.
different clients and different server software, even if you want them on a server, and essentially, it's all interchangeable. It's the exact same as email. So, like on emails, you can make an account on gmail.com or you can make an account on yahoo.com and you can use it on Gmail or Yahoo or on Outlook or whatever, but you can still email anybody who's using anything else. Like somebody on Yahoo can email somebody on Gmail, somebody
Yeah.
on Gmail can email somebody on Yahoo, so on and so forth. XMPP is the exact same, except instead of emailing, it's messaging. So you can do XMPP on all sorts of different softwares, all sorts of different like domains. Anybody can run a server. I run my own.
Yeah.
In fact, my XMPP is alex@denshi.org, which is the exact same as my email, which is really cool and nifty. So yeah, you just make an account with a server that you trust. That's a hard thing to do. And then you essentially go and you use it. And most of the time it works pretty good. The only thing that sucks is that voice and video calls, they do work, but not every client has them. So I'm still waiting on them to make a big Linux client which has it because there is one, but it's kind of like it's not that good of a client. So
Hmm.
it's called Dino and it's not that good. And there's this other web-based one called Movim, which is super weird because it's both a client, right, of XMPP, but it's also a sort of it uses a lot of the XMPP framework because of how customizable it is. It uses it as like a social media platform, and you can
Oh.
make like posts and blogs on it, which is cool if you wanna, like, have an alternative to a personal website. I would think it's a pretty, like, good via media, like a sort of middle solution because it does help you, self-host if you host your own XMPP server, but also have, like, a easy interchangeable way for people to see your blogs. But it is kinda weird, and I don't really like it. And also it's ran in, like, it's really weird. I don't know. I don't like it that much. I wish they would. They're working on improving it so the voice calls and stuff are better on it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I hope in the future they come up with one really good universal XMPP client. That would be really sick. But so far we're in a weird situation of everything being split up, which I guess it is what it is. But yeah.
Mhm. Well, I think we've come to like the end of the interview. Do you have anything you want to ask me, or
I mean,
anything we
not
didn't talk
really.
about?
Just I want to make sure that I haven't completely like bored you to death. But
No,
yeah,
no, it's
was
all
it was
good.
it good? Was it interesting?
It was interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You did a good job. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's
I
that's pretty much my pay grade. So yeah.
I mean, there's only so much we can talk about, right? And so, like, yeah, it's tough because it's like one of those like parasocial like relationship type deals where you don't want people to know too much about you, and you don't want people to like
Yeah. I mean, I'm
get
not
too
going to sit
attached to
down and
you.
talk about the
Yeah,
intricacies of my life, right?
exactly. Yeah,
But I do like, yeah, like I don't want to get into like the intricacies of my life, but I do like talking about some things, which I hope people can look at it and like get a good idea or an example. Because at the end of the
yeah.
day, the only way we learn is from listening to what other people are up to, right? So like, I don't think it's all bad, but yeah.
I think one of the stories you told before that was touching to me was you praying the rosary. And actually,
Oh
and
yeah,
yeah,
maybe I should tell that story.
yeah,
So this is kind of linking to the stuff I was talking about religion. So when
hmm
I was I guess this is more about the about me section.
yeah,
I was born in 2005, so I'm 19 right now. I was raised for about 4 years in my home country of Italy, but then I had to move away to the Middle East for my dad's job after he got laid off on account of the economic crisis. Italy was very mismanaged at the time, and he worked for a public company, so it was not very good. And
hmm
we had the fourth kid on the way, soon to be five kids, and it was not looking good for everyone. So we all moved over, and luckily everything worked out. But for the longest time, I'd very rarely be able to go to church. I was able to go to church back when I visited Europe, but I wasn't really we didn't really go that commonly when we were, in the Middle East.
hmm
When I was about 16, I think I remember the exact date. It was, I think, Monday, the 17th of January, 2022. Let me check if that's actually a real date because I hope it is. Um,
hmm yeah, hmm Mhm. I guess it's discipline, right? Mm, mhm, 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 mhm. Yeah. And so like the reason why I bring this up is because I thought it was really I don't want to say inspirational, but I thought it was thought provoking and like in a way it is an inspirational simply because you don't hear about younger people getting too involved with faith and so it's nice to hear that there are other people like that. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.